Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 302 of Kouryer Podcast. Our today's guest is Mr. Chris Avellone. He's a video game designer and writer, and in a lot of senses, I don't think he needs much introduction for those who are into like game development and been in the industry. I'm gonna link a bunch of videos and interviews he did previously in the captions. So there's a lot of questions that most people ask. The general ones have been answered in there. So today we're going to dive deep on specific topics. Mostly we're going to talk about Fallout, uh, game writing, storytelling, working in the industry, that sort of stuff, and of course his future plans. So stay tuned till the end of this episode. And with that being said, how are we doing today?
Oh, pretty good. And thanks for having me on. Did you say this is the 302nd podcast that you've done?
Correct. Correct.
Wow. Congratulations, man. That's a lot of
Thanks, man.
podcasts. Well done.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, my consistency has been kind of low. Like, I'm basically doing right now one episode per year, which I plan to change that, hopefully. But yeah, by the way, for anyone who's listening, this episode has been 4 years in the making. So this is a pretty special one as well. So yeah, you know what? I've structured my questions and the topics I want to talk about, but you know what? I'm a Fallout fan. The reason I found your work is through Fallout. I'm a fanboy. I admit it.
Well,
So we can start with talking about Fallout. So the first thing I actually wanted to ask you about, and I think I saw some comments you mentioned about it, like the Fallout TV show. Actually, like I, if you had to summarize your thoughts on it, what would you say about it? Also, by the way, for anyone who's listening, I'm gonna put a timestamp. This is gonna be a spoiler-filled talk. So if you want to avoid the spoilers for Fallout TV show, you can just skip past that. Very important before I mention that. Yep.
yeah. So I guess for the Fallout TV show, well, a lot of the positives of it are I think that if anyone watches the TV show, they'll be pretty well prepared for the Bethesda Fallout games, because the two have some similar tones about them. I think if players had watched the TV show and then they'd played the game, and if the experiences had been markedly different, I think viewers and players would be upset because, like, hey, their expectations would be dashed. But I think the TV show lines up pretty well with where the Fallout lore and tone are today. My feelings on the show, and I've done a pretty extensive review of season one, and I haven't really finished season two, but overall, like, I think with the fan service, that there are parts of the Fallout TV show that I'm very entertained by. Like, the first time I saw a stem pack, I was pretty excited. I was like, oh wow, but like those are things that people who aren't familiar with Fallout wouldn't really get jazzed by. So I guess my overall feeling was I didn't think it was a terribly well-crafted show. Like, I didn't think the actual quality of the sets, the quality of the scripts were really, they were more like maybe a 4 out of 10. However, I did find this show to be entertaining at times. So I gave the entertainment factor a 6 out of 10. But I guess my biggest disappointment with the show is, so I'm also a Doctor Who fan. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because Doctor Who has a terrible budget for doing their shows. Like, you look at a Doctor Who episode, especially the older ones, and like everything just looks fake and flimsy, and you're like, okay. But the thing is, with the Doctor Who show, like, the scripts carry it and the character interactions carry it. So like, I get invested in Doctor Who, but like when I watch Fallout, I don't get quite as invested because I'm not sure the scripts are as strong. And there's some times where I'm not even sure the writers know where they're going. And I'll be, fully transparent here. Like, I wasn't even able to finish season two. Like, episode one was really hard to watch just because I didn't think it was very well put together. And then episode two with like the Red Scorpions, I got kind of bored by. And then even though like Caesar's Legion was showing up in episode three, like I could only watch about 10 minutes of it, and then I just didn't care anymore. It didn't engage me. Like, and those were lore elements that I was familiar with that would help design, but I wasn't really interested in what the new interpretation would be, because the quality of the scripts didn't seem like they were going to promise anything that, would really resonate with me. So like I wasn't able to keep watching this show. I wasn't enjoying it. However, for people that do like the show and do watch it, like that's just my opinion. Like if you watch the show and you love it, great. Like we have no arguments. What you feel is what you feel. That's great. I just don't happen to care for it, and I can't. I wasn't able to continue watching it just because I didn't think the quality was very good.
Honestly, fair. I also have my thoughts about it, but in general, like as a fan, I appreciate, as you said, like some fan services that they were there, but in general, it just seems like it's something that was geared towards to attract like casual audiences, which there's nothing wrong with that, because of this show, like a lot of people are now discovering Fallout, so that's a good side of it.
Yeah, I agree.
But aside from that, yep, I wouldn't say also like I keep the series in a high regard, but I like the original characters introduced, like the ghoul, for example. I think
Oh yeah, Walton
yeah,
Goggins. Like, don't get me wrong.
amazing work.
He's great. Like we worked with him on Prey. I really liked his work on The Shield. Like, and when I did like my very long critique on breakdown of the characters, often I had no issues with the actors and their actual core characters. I did have issues with their actual arcs, like in the scripts. Like I didn't think that they were given very many good script development opportunities, or worse, like they were given development opportunities like Lucy, like throughout season 1, because more hardened and like becomes a little bit less naive. But then it felt like that all got reversed almost immediately as soon as season 2 started. So that was another reason I kind of lost engagement.
All right. Now let's step a little bit back to the Fallout 1. Now, from what I understand, you didn't work on Fallout 1. Is that correct?
That is correct. What happened was, and I still kick myself for this to this day. So if I could go back in time, because hindsight is like a superpower, I would have absolutely said yes when Tim Kaine swung by and said, "Hey, do you have any time to help us out with the writing on Fallout 1?" The problem was at the time, like I was already committed to one other project that wasn't very fun, but it did take up all my time. And if I divided my efforts, I think it would have made both projects suffer. But it was a missed opportunity not to be able to work on Fallout 1. And I really wish that I'd said yes to Tim Kaine when he asked.
Now, the reason I brought this up is because, correct me if I'm wrong, there's apparently an NPC in Fallout 1 called Chris Avellone. My question is, how did that happen? What was the how did the news of it got brought to you that, hey, we're gonna add you as an NPC to the game? Like, what was the story behind it?
Oh, they didn't tell me. So because I would have said no. So my feeling, and I'm gonna expound upon this design philosophy. When you put too many inside jokes, and I've definitely been guilty of this, and this is why I'm saying this. One problem sometimes that junior designers or junior developers have is they think it's a good idea to put references to the dev team or inside jokes like throughout the game, and they think that's funny and they think it's something to do. And again, like I've been guilty of it, but that particular example of me being in the game was something that more veteran Chris would have instantly disapproved of. Like we had another issue where our Black Isle CEO actually wanted to keep doing self-inserts of himself in games. And like for me, whenever you see something like that, it just takes you out of the experience. So like I wasn't in favor of that, and I didn't really like the inclusion. I mean, people can have fun, that's great, like it gets you through the long hours, but ultimately, like I think if it hurts the game's tone once you see it, or it takes you out of the experience, then you're kind of not doing your job as a designer or a developer.
Yeah, I get what you mean, because it's kind of interesting. Like games like in the 90s and early 2000s, there was a lot of Easter egg self-inserts. Like I remember very clearly when I was like, I think 7 years old, there was this first-person game that I really loved called Serious Sam by Crow Team. I don't know if you played Serious Sam or not.
I'm familiar with Serious Sam.
I'm sorry, what?
I said I'm familiar with Serious Sam, and I'm laughing because I'm thinking about all the adversaries he faces.
Yeah, like literally in the first level, there's a secret area where if you go, there are like alien like humanoid versions of each developer and their faces slapped on the head of it as like low resolution texture, like that sort of thing. It doesn't get you out of the experience, and it's just a silly little Easter egg you find. But I get what you mean about like self-inserting like main NPCs or characters in the game like that, and that could take you out of the experience. So yeah.
Yeah,
And
for us, we did a lot of that in Fallout 2, and I especially did a great deal of that in Fallout 2. And I'm really glad that uh, we learned from that experience. And I was like, that's the last time I want to do something like that, because it ends up just sort of like decaying the core theme of the game. Like it's distracting, like it's kind of juvenile, and then I don't think it really helped Fallout 2 to have that much comedy and those little inside jokes. I think it actually just hurt the Fallout franchise, frankly.
yep, and thank you so much for referencing Fallout 2, because my next question is regards to that.
Dun, dun,
What?
dun.
Yeah. What is your favorite quest in Fallout 2 and why?
Um, well, it's one that. Okay, so I should probably back up. So when Fallout 2 first started, it kind of stumbled a lot and went through a lot of leads and changes, but ultimately, the core team, the core creators from Fallout 1, Jason, Tim, and Leonard, did a draft of Fallout 2 and like a breakdown of the areas and the quests. And I think it was either Jason or Leonard who did this one assassination quest in NCR, where basically one of the options was you could put dynamite on this one kid and then go get him to talk to his father, who you're tasked with assassinating. And you could use your explosive skill to time the explosive just right, so when the kid reaches the dad, it blows him up. And I had never seen that before in a game, and I was like, wow, like that's that's pretty gruesome. So kudos to them, but that wasn't the only one. Tim also set up these kids that pickpocketed you in the den, which was a great moral dilemma, because in Fallout 2, like unfortunately, you could kill kids. But if you did that, like the stigma on your character was so bad that it sort of crippled your efforts for playing the rest of the game. Now, the problem was, because these kids were pickpocketing you, like any player's first reaction is, I'm going to kill that person and take my stuff back. But because they're kids, suddenly the shield goes up and you're like, oh, wait a minute. Like now I've got a moral problem. Like how am I going to get my stuff back without triggering that really bad effect? So that was one. And then I always liked what Leonard and Jason did for the Vault City entrance exam, where they're trying to keep out all the riffraff and only make sure that Vault citizens are in charge of everything. And the quest sequences that he did for taking that exam, I thought was also really good as well. So yeah, there were a few quests I liked, but it was honestly a lot of those were just the original three guys putting their heads together, and I'm like, oh wow, that's really clever.
All right. And of course, we could talk about when we ran and like Fallout 3 and the rest of the Fallouts chronologically. But since we don't have a lot of time, I'm just going to jump to New Vegas, the main
Dun, dun,
course, of
dun.
course, exactly. But of course, if we had enough time by the end of all our questions, we can go back to those questions as well. But
Sure.
for now, so Fallout New Vegas. Oh my God, like I don't even know where to start. I'm gonna start from here. I'm gonna start with a random question because I have a lot of questions about this masterpiece. All right. Which one is your favorite vault in the game of New Vegas, and which vault actually?
Oh, it's the presidential voting vault where no one wants to get elected.
Vault 11.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Oh my God.
That was a great premise.
Did you design the whole quest and the writing of that?
Oh no. That was Josh is the one who set up the specs for that. Yeah, and then the nice thing is, like, it sets up this whole huge mystery, because you can't really understand why all the props and the advertisements are trying to convince people not to vote for selected people. You're like, wow, like what's going on here? So like it creates a really good sense of mystery until the reveal at the end. So like I thought that arc for that vault, that experiment, was kind of interesting.
Like that vault to me as a kid kind of traumatized me a little
Oh, I'm
because
sorry.
No. It's a funny thing. Don't worry. No. I loved it. The thing is, like, for anyone who has listened to any episodes of my podcast, I mentioned Fallout New Vegas like any opportunity I get because it's my favorite game of all time, and I've been playing since I was, I think, 12 years old. Yeah, and I'm 28 now. I'm same age as Fallout One, actually.
Oh, you're a
Um,
youngin'.
yeah, I guess. But yeah, Fallout Vault 11 was very interesting in the design of the gameplay, even design of it, how things take place, the slides they show you, then in the end, the surprise, like it's a cherry on top. Like that was really interesting. Now, about Fallout New Vegas, do you have any interesting stories or anecdotes like from the development cycle of the game that you could share with us?
Let's see. There was originally a lot more focus on a Chinese satellite, I think, early on in some of the story drafts, but that eventually got dropped. But not after a lot of money was spent on various storyboarding and video tests for how like that opening movie might play out. But in the end, like none of that felt like it was ever really used. What else? It was really kind of disheartening on the Fallout DLCs to suddenly get surprised that we were going to be doing an Xbox exclusive for the first DLC, and like we were told pretty late in the process. So, and that derailed things quite a bit, and it didn't seem like we were being kept in the loop for the production there. So, like that's more of a trauma story. But we were working so many long hours. Like I actually wasn't even able to make the New Vegas release party because of that, because like there was so much work to be done. And then we had to course correct for like, oh, now we're focusing on this platform before like PC or PlayStation. So like that's going to require like another a work push. So like that was kind of disheartening. But like, you know, those things happen during development. What else? You know, a lot of the other stories are mostly just development story tragedies. So I'd probably just stick with those two stories right now.
All right, understandable. I think the development cycle was 8 months, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct?
It was about 18 months, I think.
18 months. I'm sorry. Yeah, but
Yeah.
still, that's a lot of crunches. Oh my god, I don't want to even think
Well,
about
it doesn't have to be. So we knew what we were walking into. Like we consciously signed that contract. We knew exactly how much time we had, and unfortunately, I think we just end up cramming too much design stuff in the game, some of which absolutely was not necessary. And I don't think people would have missed it if it wasn't there. And it would have made for a much more solid release because, I mean, we got hammered really badly on all the bugs when it came out, and rightfully so. Like it came out like a mess. And yeah, sure, people enjoyed it, people played it, that's fine. But like from a developer standpoint, like you don't really feel great like when you've released a game and no one's talking about the story or the quest. It's more like, oh, I hit this bug, this is frustrating. And like you just don't want to have that experience. And the players certainly don't want to have that experience. So yeah, so I mean, it was a lesson learned for, you know, scale things properly, like don't get overly ambitious with the designs, like don't get too attached to certain mechanics. Like, I mean, because like here's one example of one issue that we had. In the game, like you usually can only have one companion unless unless it's Eddie or Rex, and then like you can suddenly have like two companions with you. Now the challenge was, and we could not like get this idea like broken, but the issue was when you have those two companions with you as you're walking around, like that helps kill the frame rate. Like it can cause the areas to lag and stutter. And if we only like made decisions like, you know what, it's really cool that Eddie and Rex can come with you along with another companion, but it's really adding to the load that we're putting on the engine whenever you go into an area. So if we just made a decision like you can only just get one companion no matter what, like that would have solved a great many bugs and that we were having with the game. And then we spent so much time during the Fallout DLC development going back and correcting all those areas that were in the core game that had shipped with like, too many polygons. They were putting too much strain on the loading budget. And the worst thing was when doing the DLCs, we'd actually talked to the lead programmer and said, can you please be sure when we release New Vegas that you're reserving memory and budget in the engine so that when we introduce these DLCs, they're not going to cause any of these optimization problems. But everything that was in the core game was just so horribly optimized that we were literally spending half the time during the DLCs just correcting geometry in the game, cutting things out, like reducing polygons, that like we lost a lot of development time after the game released, just correcting all those errors. So that was a pretty heavy burden on the DLC team.
Yeah. And speaking of DLCs, actually, are you aware of the whole like things that's going on about the Dead Money DLC? That the whole theme of it is just letting go. That was the whole point of it, right? But the thing that's happening right now with the players is that when they get in the end, they hoard everything as much as possible, and they have like 1,000, 2,000 kilogram worth of loot, and they just walk away. So there's just a little bit of irony in it. Where what do you think about that?
Oh, actually, that idea was Charlie Staples. He wanted to put a game mechanic, let go theme. And he was like, well, what if you put a bunch of gold bars at the end vault, which, would have been valuable in the pre-war years, but maybe not so much in the modern New Vegas day. But the important thing was how much they would weigh you down. And that was the intention. Like if you load up your inventory and you actually can't, you can't run anymore. That's the challenge, because suddenly you're like, well, how much am I willing to throw away in order to escape from the situation versus how much can I hoard and possibly lose my life, like that. And that whole risk reward question was a lot of the level design and Dead Money as well. Like, how long can you survive in a poison cloud to grab the stuff in that chest and then run out again? Like, and are you willing to suffer that, knowing that like there's limited stem packs and it's really hard to heal? And we wanted the player to make survival choices like that in Dead Money. And not a lot of people appreciated it, but it was just like a technique we wanted to try, since like, hey, it's a DLC, we can experiment with things.
Oh yeah, actually about that, I think playing that DLC on hardcore mode was a whole different experience. Like playing normally is just it's still like very punishing, but not as punishing as hardcore. But I still haven't given that a try. But that's also in the backlog of the games and things I want to play, hopefully one day. But yeah, and last question about Fallout New Vegas for now. If you could remake Fallout New Vegas today with no limitations, what would you change and do?
Wow, that is a difficult question. So the reason it's difficult is because so many people like New Vegas. So the question would be that if New Vegas were remade, like once, like it was an actual remake, like people had played the first one, and then if your question is like, if doing a remake of that, what would I add or change? I would be very careful about adding or changing anything, because players can get pretty upset when you disrupt the experience that they had with a much loved game. So I'd be careful about that. Now, however, if you mean remake in the sense of maybe like if you meant remake in the sense of the first game never came out, but if you were to imagine it had come out and you wanted to add a bunch of stuff to it, there's plenty of stuff that I would have added and changed. The first thing I would have done is change the cast of companions, and because there were at least 3 people in New Vegas that I thought would have great companion arcs, or I noticed that people were bonding with early. So the first one was Sunny Smiles. I would have made her a companion and probably just ditched Rosa Sharon Cassidy, since they're kind of similar, or combine them. The other one I definitely would have done is Vulpus, because you encounter him pretty early in Nipton, and also there's not a lot of companions that are telling the Caesar's Legion side of the story. Like just about all the companions like detest the Legion, or they'll quit if you join the Legion. Like but so basically, like you've got a lot of people that will speak up for the NCR, they'll speak up for other factions, but there was no representation for the Legion. So like having Vulpus as someone you could potentially recruit that would have been, I think, a great idea for like, hey, you can join your party. He can talk about what it's like serving under Caesar, their plans like for the West and for NCR, point out all the problems with NCR. But he'd be a companion, so he could be with you all the time. So you could have that reactivity. That'd also be good. Also, the last one I would add, also because I think he would help give a house perspective, or Mr. House perspective, would be Vic, because he was so unique in the first area of Goodsprings, and like, oh wow, it's a brand new type of like robot, that's really cool, and like, oh, he's got a distinctive, like, he's got the cowboy theme going on. Like, I think Vic would have made a great companion Securitron. I think that would have been awesome. And if we could have like gotten Muggy to be a companion too, I think that would have been a lot of fun. Anyway, so that's just the companions. So the other thing I would have done is add more content to the Legion. Like, I didn't like the Legion as a faction, but if you're going to include them as a faction, then you need to make sure that the quest content and the scope of that content matches the other factions. Otherwise, people who side with that faction just aren't getting the same gameplay content that the other sides are, and that's kind of unfair to them. So that's another thing. Another challenge was, and this, I guess we would only have known like just from people playing the first game, is just that it was really easy for people to break the faction paths in the middle of the game, like to the point where like if you're trying to side with NCR or House or Legion, a lot of players seem to mess up those quests and eventually just fall through to the anarchist path, which, you know, I'm glad the anarchist path was there, but the intention for those faction quests was you would side with the factions. The fact that people were getting tripped up with those or breaking those unintentionally, and then they'd be forced to be they would be forced to be the anarchist, was not really an ideal situation. So repairing those quests and making them a little less easy to break, I think would have been a good idea. And let's see. There's a bunch of minor stuff, like, for example, like the last NCR commander you speak to at the end of the game, his VO seems to be split across voice actors, which when we pointed this out to Bethesda, they're like, we don't care, like, just ship it. And we were like, okay. So like, I mean, there was a bunch of little stuff like that where you're like, you notice something was obviously wrong, but there was no way that anyone was going to take the time to fix it just because the game apparently had to get out. And so I guess that also the last thing I would do too is there were some elements from the Fallout 3 version from Interplay, which was codenamed Van Buren, that I really wished we could have introduced in New Vegas, because the design for the faction politics and the faction mechanics in Van Buren gave a lot more power and agency to the player. And what I mean by that is, in Van Buren, the intention from the start was that you could always have a chance to join each faction, but not just that, you could also rise in the ranks and take over that faction, and then you could set up your own rules. So Van Buren was actually designed, so as an example with Caesar's Legion, you could join them, and then over the course of the game, you could take them over, and then you could dictate whatever policies you wanted. So suddenly this organization of slavers suddenly falls under your command, and you can use them as a force for good and change all their policies and make them like give up the slave trade. And like, I thought that would be a great moment for player agency. We're like, hey, you're in charge of the faction now, and now you can control like how it factors into the politics of the Mojave, and also how it plays out with the end game. So I thought that would give players a lot more freedom versus, oh, there's always one head of this faction and they're never going to change. And, you know, here's their philosophy like through and through. And you're basically just running around doing jobs for them. But we thought it'd be cool if like you were the one at the top, like you were assigning quests to your followers, and you were also dictating the policies of the organization too. I thought would be really cool.
Nice. And yeah, there's so much I could just talk about and yap about Fallout New Vegas for hours, but we both know that can't happen. So I'm going to the main juicy writing questions of how to write a good game narrative questions that I actually handpicked from before. So we're going to that segment. About identity, a lot of your work questions identity, like Planescape Torment, like the Fallout games. What do you personally believe defines a character or a person, like in general?
Well, in terms of, I guess, defining a character's identity, I guess like when you're in a role-playing game, I mean, you're obviously taking on a role, and if it's a well-designed role-playing game, you're going to be presented with a bunch of choices that hopefully, if those choices are designed well, they make the player pause before choosing them because there's pros and cons to each choice, and you want to make whichever one like you think either advances you as a character, it does something for the greater good. So obviously, like the choices that you include in the game and allowing the player to make real choices that both like affect like the alignment of their character, they affect people's reputation towards you and their behavior towards you. That's part of it. The other the other challenge with that is that because of how game design works, it's really hard to figure out always why a player made a choice, though. Like you can make a choice difficult, but it's also important for figuring out what a player believes or what their identity is to know why they made that choice. Because like one thing that we explored in Alpha Protocol, which was an espionage RPG that we did, was you frequently have to do things based on information that only you know, and the outside world doesn't know that. So when you do something, it can be perceived as something horrific by the global population, but the reason you did it wasn't for an evil act or to do damage to anything. You just knew for a fact that if you didn't do that, the consequences would be much worse. So ideally, like when trying to examine a player's identity, you also want to give them options in the game to sort of give them a chance to explain why they did what they did. Because, you can say like, hey, someone's always defined by their actions, but knowing why they took the action too is also important. It's those two things aren't separate at all. So I think that factors into like the identity question that you asked.
Yeah, and speaking of motives, actually, there are a lot of themes that have been explored, like in games and movies recently, this past couple of decades, I would say. But it's still, when it comes to your writing, what questions are you still trying to answer through it? Like, is there any specific topic or subject or theme you're trying to focus on and answer through your writing?
Um, well, I guess the one thing that I've always kind of struggled with, and it does affect the writing, and it does affect the mechanics of the writing, is that I still find the idea of creating a better dialogue and interaction system to be elusive, because I feel like, for the past 2 or 3 decades, maybe more, like a lot of the dialogue and interactions in games is basically just menu driven. Like it's like, hey, choose this, go back there, find the main question node. And that the design element of how to improve on that or to make a system that's better than that um, has always been a challenge. But I think it's important because I think that mode of storytelling gets very stale after a while and predictable. Like I know people can get comfortable with it, but there's got to be other ways of doing interactions in games that are like, more tense or more engaging. And one example of that is like in Alpha Protocol when we had the timers for dialogue choices, that instantly change the feel of dialogues to something that we're like, oh, well, I'll just like choose this option and that option and then go back here. It suddenly made the stakes of that conversation much, much higher. And then because there was a time limit for each response, that also added the pressure. And the fun thing about that was when we were doing the focus testing for Alpha Protocol, the results that we got back were that people were just as engaged, if not more, in a dialogue sequence as they were in combat. and that was perfect. I was like, wow, okay, that really worked. And Telltale also did the same thing with their games with time limits for responses too. And I think like that's a minor evolution of things, but it does change the tone and your experience with a dialogue system. So I guess I've thought about things like how could VR help with interactions, like how would eye tracking like being able to be done in conversations, like how would that change dialogue? Like, so for example, like if you're talking to someone but you're always looking over their shoulder, like if you have the design mechanics to actually detect that and then respond to that, or like, hey, if the player's like running through someone's house and they're talking to that person while they're looting, like the ability to recognize that a player's doing that and say things like, hey, you're not going to face me, like, hey, what are you doing going through my stuff? Like, I love to have as many scripting hooks for that as possible, but it does bog down the amount of time it takes to do each dialogue. So I guess I'm still looking for that perfect dialogue system that isn't menu driven, but I don't have any really great solutions at the moment.
Speaking of dialogue systems, in like both Fallout 3 and New Vegas, like and just any RPG for that matter, like there are skill tricks like in dialogues, right? And both Fallout 3 and New Vegas did it differently. For Fallout New Vegas, it was like if you had, for example, 78 on speech, you can pass a 75 speech check. But in Fallout 3, it was kind of like a dice roll percentage thingy. So, in your opinion, like even these two aside, what do you think is the best way to kind of put this feature implemented in a game? Like, do you think it should be kind of like a dice roll? Because a lot of games do that. Baldur's Gate 3, like most RPGs that are like turn-based, or is it like the other kind of like set in stone way that Fallout New Vegas does? What do you think?
So my answer on that is a little complicated. So my answer is that it's very easy to do both. And also because New Vegas had that survival mode, hardcore mode, you could have switched on that for dialogues too, where it's like, hey, now instead of doing just a set check, like, hey, if you have over 75, it's great. Then like it would suddenly be much more iffy. And that I think would be fine for a more hardcore audience. The whole reason that set check happens, like, hey, well, if you have the value over the skill, like it's automatically going to work, is a holdover from Black Isle Studios design. And actually, I think it was Fallout 2 that caused us to start doing it. Because before that, like it was a random roll, like you could have a 95% chance in speech, but there was still a chance you could fail no matter what. Or you could even have like over 100% in speech and still have a chance to fail no matter what. The problem was it was really crushing at the end of Fallout 2 if you had built a speech character in particular, that if you fail that final speech check, it's not going to go well for you. Like you are going to get murdered. But the thing is, like, if you spent the whole game upping your speech skill, like it also feels disappointing that it didn't work, because then you're like, well, I built my whole character around this, and now my game based on random chance says that's not going to happen. Now, there's many schools of thought on how you should deal with that. Like for me, like it's disappointing as a player playing with a speech character, but I couldn't argue that would make for an interesting story. But it also just causes people usually to reload, which is never a great thing. We're like, oh, they just save scummed, and because the game didn't give them the chance they wanted to at an important moment, they're just going to keep reloading until they succeed. That's not fun too. So the fact it was a set check kind of answered that question for us. We're like, hey, if you have your speech skill up to this high, it's going to be a flat win just because we know you're a speech character. So I think that's when it really started back at Black Isle. And then we just started carrying it through to other games as well. I think one thing a random roll would have made better is it would have made like a lot of the stupid or the badly worded lines more evident. Like, you could have a 95% skill, but you could just like really flub it on that one. So you'd see like the really bad response that you're giving, which I think would be more fun, because I don't think anyone chose a bad speech check once they saw it. They may have laughed about it, like, oh, I'm definitely not going to say that. But I don't know if many people chose it. So like all the work put into that was kind of questionable, but at the same time, like that's more consistent with how other skills worked or lock picking or whatever. So I think it worked in that respect. Anyway, so that's the story of how it got created. That's the story of why set checks started getting introduced in Black Isle and Obsidian games. It's not, in my opinion, a reason never to do range rolls for like for skill checks. I think that's a mode that I think people would appreciate. But if you're doing like story mode, I'd probably just keep it to set skill checks. And yeah, I know there's a whole bunch of problems with skill checks, which I could get into, but I don't want to consume the whole podcast with that.
No worries, no worries. All right, so let's go to the next question. Have you ever written a choice where you didn't know what the right answer was?
Yeah. Well, I mean, a lot of the New Vegas arcs are like that, where it's like, well, you don't know how things are going to pan out in the long run. They're ideally, when designing a choice, like there should be both good and bad elements to each choice, to the point where you're like, you pause before you make it, because you're like, oh, well, I know the bad thing that's going to happen as a result of that, but the overall good is going to be this. So yeah, and also the reason you don't include a right answer for a quest is because that usually makes the quest less interesting, where it's like, well, that's not really factoring in the player's experience. It's not really factoring into what their long-term goals are. Like if they want to be like a low karma character and like that's their intention, like, and in that case, the right version of this dialogue is completely different than the paladin type character. And if you're doing a role-playing game, you want to cater to all those play styles. Like you don't want to dismiss them, because if you're only rewarding people that make this one right good choice in your mind, then it's not, you're mostly just telling them what the theme of the game is. You're telling them what the solution for the quest is. And that's being dictated to isn't really a great way to do role-playing design. And that was one challenge working on Dying Light 2, because we actually had a pretty good theme that we were kicking around that was based on survival, like, at what cost survival. But the developers didn't want to consider that there was any other option other than one for the whole game. And I'm like, well, for an open world game where players can have all sorts of motivations, like that doesn't feel like it's really taking the player's viewpoint into account. And also it's kind of simplistic. And it's also, you're kind of dictating what basically you're asking a question in the game, but really there's only one right answer. So like, what's the point of you mulling it over? Because in the context of the game, like it's determined what the right answer is. And that isn't very interesting to me.
Thank you so much for mentioning Dying Light 2, because I also want to point out and give a shout out to a YouTube channel, Best Gamer Ali. He made a video about this whole situation, actually, like about you and the Dying Light 2 development and sort of stuff. That was really helpful for my research for this episode. And also, apparently, they have a team called Renaissance Team, and they're making the E3 2018 version of Dying Light 2, and it's called Project Renaissance, apparently. And their work seems to be really awesome. Good. They're super passionate, and I think they have a YouTube channel. I think I'll link the video down in the captions, so go check it out for anyone who's interested. But yeah, I mean, honestly, more power to them. And yeah, by the way, are you surprised by that people are actually like really into like wanting to rebuild the E3 2018 version of the game?
That was the first time I heard about it, but I guess I'm both surprised, but then I realize I shouldn't be surprised based on all the New Vegas mods, where it's like, wow, people are trying to resurrect Van Buren.
Oh yeah.
Or they're trying to do like, a take on Fallout in other parts of the world, or they're changing certain things they didn't like about New Vegas. And here's one great story from that. Like when New Vegas came out, like we really paid attention to the mod community, and thank God, because the mod community were the ones who were showcasing all the places we'd fallen short. And notably, like the home base design. Like we just glanced at some of the home base designs that were on the Nexus, and we realized how much we dropped the ball. Because like those home bases were amazing. Like they'd have mannequins where like you could put armor sets on them and display them in your display them in your base. They had like different ammo caches, like on a shelf wall for all the different kinds of ammo, all easily sorted. And I'm like, we really have to up our game and make a much better HQ for New Vegas. So, I mean, that was a big thrust of Old World Blues, where it's like, we're just going to make a brand new HQ for you that covers all the bases, and we're going to try to add personalities in there and all this other stuff. But we wouldn't have been able to do that had the mod community not set the example and said, you could do better. And we're like, you know what, probably could, and we're really sorry we didn't. So here's how we fix it.
All right. And actually, are there any games that impressed you with its writing and narrative in the past couple of years?
Yeah, there's quite a few. So I know Expedition 33 is, a popular topic to talk about, but I did very much enjoy the story in that. I thought it was really interesting that multiple characters in your party struggle with suicide. I also thought it was very interesting, just the lore setup for the world, even though it did reduce my enjoyment in the game at 2 key points. Even so, I was still impressed by the structure of how they set up the sort of like the universe for how Expedition 33 came about. And it also opened up doors to future games, I think, in a really imaginative way. So like, I thought that was really good. I also thought the end choice at the end was one that was difficult for me to make. And I believe that I made the wrong one for the right reasons. And I thought that was a very clever trick, because that's the whole examination of the game. And I, quote unquote, fell for it, but I was willing to fall for it because I cared about certain characters. And that's another narrative success for that game. They made me care about my party members very strongly. Other games, though, I thought Knights of the Republic 1, I thought was an amazing game. I thought BioWare brought back my love for Star Wars, where I'm like, oh, wow, this is all the great stuff that I loved about Star Wars. And it's got a really great story. It's got a really great twist. And we were blessed to do the sequel. But that first game, I was like, wow, this is really well done. Portal and Portal 2, I thought, are really good examples of environmental storytelling, and also effective ways to combine humor along with mechanics. I thought was really clever. And I'm also getting into this game called The Forgotten City, which someone recommended to me. And the storyline there so far is, it's an indie game. I think it was done like only like a handful of people, but it's really imaginative. It's set in ancient Rome. It's kind of like a time loop story, which I know it sounds cliche, but they take a much different approach, and the writing is quite good. So so Forgotten City is another game that I'm enjoying as well.
All right. Actually, there's 2 games in specific I wanted to ask your opinion on their writing. The first one is Detroit Become Human. I don't know if you've played that or know the game.
I have not played it. I know some elements about it, but I could only partially speak to it.
All right. Then the next game, which I'm sure you've heard of, Disco Elysium. What do you think about that?
Oh, yeah, I thought that was a very well written game too. And I still talk with Robert Kurvitz quite a bit, and I think that the game that his new company is developing, I think it's even crazier than Disco Elysium in a good way, and I think people will be really both surprised, impressed, and really drawn in once it's announced. So I'm really looking forward to that. But yeah, I like Disco Elysium. I thought it was really clever how they handled the skill and attribute interjections and dialogue. I thought that was really well done. And they each had kind of like their personalities as well, which is kind of neat. I did think that there was too much talking in the game, because I told Robert this, so it's not like a slam or anything. I was like, Robert, when I had an opportunity to collect trash in Disco Elysium, I was so relieved, just because it was something else that I could do that wasn't talking to somebody. And I think you need those those change in game mechanics to keep this to sort of keep your energy level up. Because if you're constantly doing like the dialogues again and again and again, sometimes that can kind of wear you down. And disco dialogues are ones you really have to pay attention to too. So it's actually a lot of effort to make sure that you're like going through, like making sure you're making the wisest choice for you and the game. So there's a challenge there. But yeah, I really enjoy Disco Elysium.
Honestly, the reason I asked that is because I wanted to segue to this part as well. Today, I was doing the last checkup on your Wikipedia page in case I missed something or not. And at the end, the last thing that was written is that you have been brought by on Red Info, a studio founded by Robert Kurvitz and Alexander Rostov, and for their spiritual sequel to Disco Elysium. And that I was like, got really excited. Like, that's going to be my GTA 6. I don't care about GTA 6. It's probably gonna be, I'm sure it's gonna be a great game, but this is what I'm really interested in. And the fact that they brought you on as well to like read review or help them, I don't know.
Well, I can't talk too much about that. That's more something for
obviously that's what
for Robert to talk about. Actually, the latest title that I'm spending the most time on is I'm working with one of the writers from Detroit, Become Human. I hope I have that right. I hope that title right. Adam Williams, and we're working on a more dark themed isometric RPG with Republic Games, which is a studio that he founded once he left Quantic Dreams. And that's been going really great. And he's got some different dialogue mechanics that I really wish I'd thought of. But they were so smart that when he explained them to me, I'm like, I would love to help you out with this. And he's like, well, I would love to have you come on board. And I'm like, well, I would love to say yes to that. He goes, why don't you? I'm like, okay, I'm saying yes. So I'm on board, and we're working on that kind of full steam right now. And that's been a lot of fun.
All right. And have you ever had a story you loved get cut or changed, and how do you handle it?
Oh, yeah, plenty of times. So it's actually just kind of part of the job, where it's like, I mean, because you can't, I mean, unless you're like the project director, and generally the only person you answer to at that point are like publisher executives or executives of the studio. But usually when I'm a writer, I'm answering to somebody else, and it's absolutely natural for things to get cut or changed, just because there's elements of the project that can change for the right reasons. And even if it affects your story, like, you want to be able to roll with that. So you're actually supporting the game, not just your writing. So that ends up being important. The only time it becomes a problem is when you're not sure why it was cut, or they can't tell you why it was cut, or because the problem there is you submitted something or you've implemented something. They want to go in a different direction, or they want to do it in a different way, but they can't give you the reasons why. Like, and here's the thing, like, it's also fine to say, we don't like that. But when they do that, it's important that they break down why, because otherwise, if they don't tell you that, you're in danger of making the same mistake again. So I have no issues with stuff being cut, with being changed. It's only if there's no rhyme or reason to it. And I don't have any critique or feedback to fall back on to make sure that the next attempt at writing is more in line with expectations. And that's one challenge. The other challenge is sometimes, like, just quests get cut, characters get cut, and you have to roll with that too, and then just figure out a way to edit your work or change your work or just cut out parts to make it fit with a new storyline. And that's just the way it is.
Yep. And speaking of like working in that environment, like, what's the hardest part about collaborating with designers or directors on story? Because I'm sure a lot of things, like maybe for game mechanic reasons or time crunch reasons or anything else, like things could get cut. But aside from that, sometimes, like, Team Ken actually had a video about this, like specifically for engineers on the team, that sometimes how there's a lot of miscommunication between designers and engineers about how game development is. And it's good that both sides try to understand how the other side works. But in your case, working as a designer, how hard it is, like what is the hardest part about collaborating with designers and directors on a story specifically?
Well, so the worst experience I've had is when your lead writer is absent, and they haven't given you the specs or a style guide with which to work with. So you're basically shooting in the dark. And this was an experience I had working on a project with Mike Laidlaw and Emily Grace Buck. Like Mike was only on the project for a short period of time, but when I was working with Emily, that was really difficult because she wasn't available a lot. So like I'd get a lot of her work, or because she was gone for some reason, and then like I'd get one of her companions, and then like the team would be like, hey, look, we need someone else to fill this out because we're in a time crunch, and Emily can't do it. So like I would end up doing all of her work. And what's worse is I didn't know if I was hitting like the right point or not, just because they weren't there to field critiques or feedback or even just give me any direction on what they'd intended with a character. So that was really difficult. But on a more normal team, the biggest difficulty, which is actually pretty easy to correct, is make sure that like you're both on the same page with the tone and the vision for the game. Like, if you're doing a survival horror game, like don't make any ifs, ands, or buts about it. Like that's the tone we're going for. Like that's the tone that was set. Like that's easy to follow, as long as everyone's on the same page for that. And the way you're supposed to get people on board with that is you sort of set up a style guide for writing, and generally like every department, whether it's engineering or animation, sets up a guide for how things should be done within their discipline. And writing is no different. Like, a writing style guide might break down like, here's how you spell stem pack. Like, here's what you capitalize in Fallout terms, which ones you don't. Like, here's how we do our dialogue structure. Like, here's the theme of the game that we're trying to support. And here's how we're doing skill checks. And here's how they should be formatted. Here's the order of the dialogue responses. The problem is you can do all of that, and then for whatever reason, the writers don't follow it. And this hasn't happened to me directly, but it did happen on Outer Worlds 1, where Tim Kaine and Leonard Biarski had set up a style guide for like, here's the writing and the tone of the world, tone of the universe in Outer Worlds. And the writers, for whatever reason, I don't know if they didn't read it, if they didn't embrace it, but they just felt like they just ignored all of it. And it's really tough to set up a style guide, provide the bookends for what the experience is, and then your own developers end up throwing that out the window and kind of creating a narrative mess in some ways that that the directors of the project weren't happy with. They were like, we asked you guys, we asked everybody to like, this was our style guide, like this is the direction of the project, but none of you did it. So it's all like a lot of time is wasted just revising all that stuff or finding a way to make it fit just because people didn't follow directions.
All right. And well, I have another relevant question. How modern AAA pipelines made storytelling better or worse?
Well, so an easy one is usually pipelines, and this is the important thing to keep in mind, pipelines, when they're adjusted, ideally are done to make the game experience better. Not your life easier, but the game better. And that's the most important thing. So voice acting is an example. Like, it's pretty common nowadays that like, a lot of the text in games are voice acted, which I think everyone would agree, as long as the quality is there, that's a great thing to have. And in older games, it was often too expensive to do that. And it also carries with it a bunch of limitations. So like, for example, in New Vegas, Bethesda has a process where they have to lock down all the text like many, many months before the game releases, because you have to translate it all in other languages. And any changes you make after that point have kind of like a dangerous ripple effect. But as long as you plan for it and you're ready for it, sure, it adds more work. It can add more stress. It can reduce the iteration time. Like, oh, that dialogue that I wrote 3 months ago, a lot of people have been playing it the past few weeks and notice that it kind of like misses the point a lot of these. Suddenly you can't revise it as easily as you would before voice recording happened. And then there's the amount of voice recording. It's like with New Vegas, like we had 4 different studios recording voice at the same time. Like it was almost nonstop. I think it went on for maybe 3 or 4 months like that. And that was just insane. Like that's a huge process to juggle. Now, but the end result is like all those characters are voice acted, which I think it makes for a better player experience. So sure, the pipelines might get more difficult for the writer, but if it makes the game better, that's the thing to focus on.
All right. And all right, let me ask you this now. For someone building their first narrative-driven game, what should they focus on?
Figure out the gameplay system first. Like figure out what the gameplay loop is, figure out what the challenge is for the character. Figure out, usually it's not hard to figure out what the vision for your narrative is going to be, because there's obviously a reason you want to start doing it in the first place. And if you hold on to that and you can define it and explain it to others, like that's great. That's part of the things that you should do. Like if you're doing it by yourself, it's less of a problem in terms of like you don't have to set up a style guide because you are the style guide. But having that in place before you write and having a clear vision of what you want the player to feel, like what the important emotional points are, like why you're writing the story, like what you think the challenge of the story is going to be. All those things are important things to sort of like break down. But at the same time, you can't ignore the gameplay systems that are in place. So like if it's, Alpha Protocol, a spy, espionage game, like all those stealth mechanics and shooting mechanics and all the stuff that the protagonist can do, the narrative is intended to support all of that. So unless those game systems are locked down and you understand them, you can do a lot of damage with your narrative by not adhering to the game mechanics, not explaining away certain things. And one quick example of that is it's sort of a conceit in Knights of the Republic 1 that your protagonist somehow understands every alien language he hears. Like, and that would strike anybody as weird, I think, when playing that game, because like to know every single alien language that you encounter is not something that every Star Wars character usually is able to do. But what the narrative designers did, I think, in the first 5 minutes is the one commander who comes to grab you on the ship, like condenses your resume into a summary, and he goes, "Yeah, I hear you a lot of extensive experience with alien languages." Like he just mentions it in one line in passing, and suddenly it explains away any questions you might have had about why you understand all these languages, because the game told you why very quickly. So suddenly that game mechanic of dialogue, the narrative just supported it, explained it away, and now it's a natural part of the universe that you're in. So that's good. Also, not only should you be aware of the gameplay loop, but you should also be aware of the user interface that's being used to communicate the narrative. What sort of mechanisms are you using to communicate the story? Like, is it solely cinematics? Is it environmental storytelling? Are you going to have talking head conversations with menu-driven dialogue? Is that dialogue going to be tracking anything? Is there any reputation changes, alignment changes? All that stuff is important for you to know, so you can craft a type of story that fits with the budget and also fits the interface for how the player communicates with the game. And that's also important. If you have the luxury for it, one of the best things to do, which we were able to do on Torment, and apparently this is something that BioWare just was always doing in the past, was they just write the story first. And sure, you may not keep all of that, but once you've written it from start to finish, you have a sense of the major characters, what they're going to say, like implementing it into a game is a lot easier and ends up being a lot stronger. Like I was able to work on Torment for I think a good while before like I actually got a team to work on it. So I just wrote like all the important key dialogues I could, set up the framework structure for the narrative. I already knew that it was going to be an Infinity Engine game. So like, I mean, like Baldur's Gate 1 and Baldur's Gate 2. So a lot of the questions about how the narrative would be communicated and how it would be set up was already answered by that engine. So I was able just to go, okay, well, if I'm in charge of the story, like here's the locations we should visit, here's the characters you should meet, here's the major challenges, here's the expectation for like the end challenge of the game. I was able to do like a first draft of all of that. And that I think ended up making the Torment narrative stronger just because there was a foundation to build upon once people started implementing it. Like for some districts in the game, I could just pass off character sheets and say, hey, you don't have to do like what I've written here, but this should give you a good jumping off point for like designing this section of the world. And like some designers did their own thing, some of them incorporated some of those ideas, but overall, because they had something to look at and evaluate as a foundation and use that as an example, I think that also helped with the narrative immensely.
All right. And do you think games are uniquely suited to explore philosophy compared to books or film? Or what edge exactly games do you think have over other form of media?
Well, so when you're reading a book on philosophy, or watching a film or a series on philosophy, you're mostly a passive observer. And in most educational systems, like they don't rely solely on that. Like it's more of a back and forth, like, challenge a student on their opinions, like ask them to explain what they took away from the philosophy. But games are uniquely suited to do that within their structure, where it's like, okay, now the player, we're going to expose them to this philosophy. We're going to challenge them on certain points, see if they understand it, or if they don't understand it, or they're embracing a different philosophy. The fact that it's interactive and that there's game mechanics around it, I think ends up creating a stronger impact in learning than it would had you just passively absorbed everything and just tried to memorize everything that was being told to you versus, oh, I was in a game that was exploring these Plato concepts and here's what it made me think about and here's what I took away from that. Usually because you're experiencing it versus passively absorbing it, I think that makes games a stronger medium, not just for education in general, but for that philosophy question you just asked.
I meant for philosophy questions mostly. Yeah, I should have specified. But actually, in talking about design process, you mentioned something about the fact that on working on, I think in Black Isle, you mentioned that first the story was written first and the gameplay came second, that type of thing. I was wondering, like, is it like usually like that, or sometimes the gameplay is ready first, then the story comes? Like, and in your experience, which one makes the process more smoother?
So Torment I think, was the only game at Black Isle where we were able to write first. Van Buren, in the Fallout 3 version of Interplay, that we also started to do a full write-up of before game production began, and we even had like pen and paper game sessions to try out like area mechanics and quest mechanics. So just to clarify, Torment really was the only one where, hey, the story got written first, key characters are developed first, and I think that ended up making a stronger narrative for the game. But the problem is the game mechanics weren't that great. I guess it depends what you want to focus on with the development. I personally think the gameplay loop is the most important thing, and dialogue can be an important part of the gameplay loop. But if the director has a clear vision for what they want the game to be, like survival horror and the New Vegas environment, as long as they have a clear vision, they can break it down. They set up like expectation and style guides for what they want the player experience to be. and they've defined all the special mechanics that are going to occur, like, and the Dead Money DLC, there's going to be explosive collars, and like there's like mist hazards and all these other things that, and here's what they're supposed to represent, like ghost people are supposed to make the place feel more terrifying and more like underworldy, like et cetera, et cetera. So having that stuff laid out in advance, I think, sort of gets everyone on the same page and provides like a compass point for people to follow. And I generally prefer just having game mechanics laid down first. But I do recognize there's times that people like are writing a story for a game because they have a particular story idea in mind and they want to expose the player to that or share that with the player. And sometimes that can dictate the game development process. And I just think in Torment, it was a little bit more unbalanced towards the story versus the things that you were doing in the game. Like there wasn't much dungeon exploration or fighting that was of quality, nor was there as much of it as I think there should have been. But I mean, and I think a lot of people have noticed that lack when playing Torment, and I completely understand. It's a matter of the focus was in a different place, and sure, that focus may have caused the narrative to be stronger, but if the rest of the game is weaker, like I don't like that. That feels like a mistake.
Yep. And now I think we have some extra time though, so I can go back to some of the previous questions I had to skip through to prioritize.
Right.
Now, yes, now I want to go back to Fallout New Vegas, like surprisingly. Was there a faction you personally agreed with the most or tried to stay neutral? Like, just for me personally, in my first playthrough ever, I remember when I was a kid, I choose Master House. All right. Then I grew up again a little bit more, I chose the Anarchist one. Then again, I think I first choose, I choose NCR second, then third the Anarchist route, where you just independent New Vegas. But I want to know, like, what do you think about which faction realistically would benefit the wasteland of New Vegas the most, in your opinion?
Well, so I'll give you the answer first, but then I want to comment on your answer. So for me, it's always Anarchist because I'm the hero of the game. I'm the protagonist. Like I'm the one making all the changes happen in the game. I'm an agent of change, and I trust me. So anarchist option is usually the one that I favor. Like I like the main faction leaders. NCR probably the least because I didn't think they could govern effectively, and I didn't like the Legion because they're not a good faction to ally with. But that doesn't mean that I would naturally gravitate towards House either. But what I thought was interesting about your answer was, at different stages in your life, you made different choices, which I thought that's great. That's perfect. And also, I feel like when you're doing faction design, you want players to pause like they would making a choice, like, and actually examine, hey, like what parts about this faction do I think embrace my philosophy in this game? Like do they have a good approach to governing the Mojave? Like, are they seeing the same problems that I do that I think are the most important ones to fix in this fictional world? And the ideal situation is that in faction design, each of those factions should have had both very strong pros and cons related to that situation, so that you actually thought about the choice that you were making. Because I mean, that's where interesting decisions come from, is when the factions are nuanced to the point where their philosophies might not be perfect, but you recognize that there's a greater good or some greater work that can be accomplished by allying with them. And I think that's what you want to strive for in faction design. I don't think New Vegas did a good job of doing the faction representation, the faction balance, and there were a lot of problems with the faction design, especially with Caesar's Legion, where I thought like very few people would want to join them unless that was on the third or fourth playthrough and they felt like trying it, because the Legion wasn't presented with any sort, like they were just negative all the way through. And if you're playing a female character, like especially, you don't want to join them. And then some of the best companions hate the Legion too. So like, if you want Boone in your party, which most people do, and the fact that he hates the Legion, like that's going to make you hate them too. Where it's like, oh, I don't want to be part of them. I'm going to lose Boone. Like, so like even companion choices can factor into faction design. But the end goal is each faction should have pros and cons. Players should feel like they're making a difficult decision or a decision that at least they have to think about when allying with each faction. And I think that's what you want to strive for faction design. And I don't think the factions in New Vegas really held up to that bar. I thought they were decent, and some of them were just there to serve a role, like Caesar's Legion, but not all of them were developed in a way that gave the player a lot of agency.
Yeah, especially like with Boone, like his story was really interesting to me because you don't see stories like that much in the media of what he went through and what he saw and he had to do. But yeah, Boone specifically was a companion for me that also stood out always. He's an interesting character.
Yeah, and companion design can do a lot to change a player's perspective on the world. So to continue with the theme of faction design, we had a similar problem to Boone in Pillars of Eternity 1, which I didn't realize until one of the programmers that I used to work with, and he's a friend of mine now, Anthony Davis. He pointed out that the reason that he never engaged with the factions in Pillars, even though like a lot of design effort went into these factions, he said it's because like Eater didn't like them. Like every time like a faction rep would show up, like Eater, who's a great companion, would go, "Oh, not these guys again. Oh, these guys are the worst." Like, and because he said that, like the players are instantly put off from interacting with that faction because your buddy just told you that they suck. So suddenly you're like, well, I trust my buddy. And so like even a companion's reaction to a faction factors into the faction design itself. So you want to be careful with that too. And I feel stupid. Like I didn't realize that until they pointed it out. And I'm like, that makes perfect sense. So actually it's part of like my design and style guide for future games where I'm like, please watch out for this particular aspect in faction design because it can cause people to ignore certain parts of content very easily if you're not careful.
Yeah, speaking of that, actually, like, for what installment of Fallout did you create the Fallout Bible, and how was the process of it? And do you also know if it's still used in the future Fallouts, like in Fallout 3, 4, New Vegas? Like, is it still in use by the development team?
It's not canon. I do believe that they use the list of potential vault experiments for a few of the vaults. But I don't know much more beyond that. Yeah, so the Fallout Bible was a collection of written releases that I put together after Fallout 2. And I was like, wow, we're probably not going to be able to do Fallout 3 for a long period of time, if ever. But I really want to keep the franchise alive. I want to keep the discussions about it alive. I want to keep the awareness of that world still active in players' imaginations. And also, it was a great way to share some of the development stories, the mechanics, the decisions for why we did certain things with the community. Because the community, I mean, they love to see like how a design reached the stage that it did. Like, even things like, here's how they broke down the critical hit tables, and like being able to share that with everybody was a really gratifying experience. Like it was a labor of love and it took a lot of hours, but I really enjoyed interacting with the community over that. Even when their feedback was negative, it was still something that I could learn from to help inform my view of the Fallout universe and also inform player expectations too. So yeah, it was an activity that I just did in my own time, and I wanted to do it because I love Fallout so much, and I really thought that the community would really enjoy seeing the information that was being shared, because not many people have the insight into game development. So being able to expose that to the community was great.
All right. Now let's take a little break from all this industry and game development, all this stuff. I want to ask like a personal question. What area beside the one that you're working on right now would you be interested to explore and learn in the future? Like basically what other whatever you're doing right now as your main thing you got going on is maybe it could be a sport, it could be crocheting, it could be carpentry. I don't know. Like, what does Chris Avellone do besides game development and writing and all that stuff? That's what we want to know.
So I foster kittens, and I didn't realize that fostering was a thing. And just to explain it, like it's when you take animals from a local shelter and you take care of the kittens or the puppies for like 3 to 4 weeks until they're ready for adoption. And because I was traveling so much and I was working so much, I haven't been able to ever really get a cat myself. But then once I heard about the fostering program, I'm like, oh, wow. So there's a way I can help out the local shelter. Like I can help raise, cats for a short period of time. And that's been really a very gratifying experience. It's been really great to, take care of another living creature, and kittens are a lot of fun. It's like taking care of a bunch of flying squirrels. They'll hop all over the house and they'll get everywhere. Yeah, and just learning how to take care of animals and, the proper procedures for raising them and the things to watch out for. And if I ever do get a cat, full time for real, like I think I'll be prepared for like, how to take care of a cat absolutely properly just because of all the fostering experience. But it's been a really great thing for emotional well-being. It's something that even if you're having the worst day, having a kitten fall asleep on your chest makes all the badness go away. So there's that. But yeah, so I mean, if people out there might be receptive to a fostering program, like your local shelter will no doubt appreciate it, and you'll be giving a lot of great kittens a head start on life and a head start on being loved, and it's a great way to give back.
All right, that's actually amazing. And the most fun thing about kittens and just animals in general is how each and every one of them have a completely different personality. Is that correct?
Yep. There's some that are princesses, and then there's ones that are like the ginger ones, like tend to be really, really energetic and crazy. And then there's the floofy and the there's a whole range of different personalities. But the best thing is when you get a group of kittens that are very scared, like, and they're in a new place, like, and they were scared in the shelter. And then when you bring them home, they're still got a little bit of fear about them. They don't know where they are. But the most gratifying thing is when within a few days, within a week, you suddenly see their personalities change. They realize they're in a safe environment. They realize it's a safe place to explore. They realize that you will feed them. Like they don't have to stress out about hunting down. And they can just play and relax and like just be kittens. And to see them go from scared kittens to more, oh wow, maybe humans aren't so bad, and I really like humans. That seeing that change in kittens is also really gratifying.
All right. And what are you working on right now that you can tell us about? What kind of project is it, or that you can share with us? Of course, if it's not NDA, we already touched upon the Red Info studio with the Kurvitz and the Disco Elysium sequel. But aside from that, is there anything else going on in your professional life that you could share with us, of course?
Yeah, so I'm working on I think maybe 6 projects right now at different levels. Some projects don't require much time from me, and some of them aren't even writing related. But so I did mention the working with Adam Williams from Quantic Dreams at Republic Games, and that's the dark themed RPG with the very cool system mechanics that I mentioned. We also discussed the Red Info earlier. Although I can't comment on that. The other thing that I haven't mentioned is I'm also working with the ex-Arcane guys who set up Wolf Eye Studios. They did Weird West, and I'm working with them on their new project, which is pretty great. And I would speak more about it, but the director, Raphael Colantonio, he's the one who's probably best prepared to speak to that, and also know when the publishers say it's okay to start marketing it in full force, in which case we can probably talk more about it. But he's the one leading the charge on that, and I'm just happy to help.
All right. Awesome. And we've reached the final question of this episode, which is a segment that for the purposes that is related to this specific question, I didn't share it with you in the email I sent, by the way. So because I
Oh
want
boy,
I,
trickery.
now, wait,
Right
trust
now.
me. No, because I needed the answer on the spot because you couldn't. It would be kind of cheating if you had thought about it before, well prepared. I do this with all guests. Don't worry, no exceptions. But the question and segment is called time capsule, and it's actually my favorite part of the one of my favorite parts of the podcast. And it's basically this: imagine you only had like a limited amount of time left, and you had a voice recorder next to you, and you can imagine yourself in any apocalyptic situation of your choice as well, and at some and you have a chance to leave any message to anyone else who might find this recording, and you could, these are your final moments, and you could leave any message. Like, what would Chris Avellone say in that situation to anyone who might be listening in any point of time in future? Like, basically, imagine also you're talking to people, listeners in 100 years, who, I don't know, for some reason access their internet and now listening to this for some reason. I don't know. But basically, what is your message to humanity, like, from you? It could be
Uh,
anything.
we have less time than we think, um, and enjoy your life, but not at the expense of others. And the most important thing is one good question to always ask yourself is if you were on your deathbed and looking back on your life, what do you think you would truly appreciate that you'd done for yourself or others or both, um, versus things that may have just been for you and maybe didn't matter in the long run, and examine your priorities from that deathbed perspective.
Honestly, very good answer. I like it. And well, where can people contact you if they have any questions? Like, what is your preferred channel of communication?
So people can contact me just about anywhere. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram, although I don't I don't get a lot of work talking Instagram. I'm also on X and Blue Sky. So, and I always encourage people, like, if you have questions about writing or any advice on how to get in the industry, or even if you just want to kick an idea around, like, I'm always happy to sign an NDA and discuss it, if it might get another writer unblocked and, like, make for a better narrative in a future game. So I'm always up for that. So people are welcome to contact me anytime. I can't always get back to people immediately, and I don't check those inboxes nearly as much as I should. But one thing that was always problematic when I was getting the industry that really disheartened me was anytime I asked someone for help, no one had time ever. Like, they would not make the time. They would treat it as a burden. You felt horrible for asking. Usually, sometimes you get shut down rather rudely. But now that I'm in the industry, um, I want to make sure that I'm not that person. Like, I want to help. If you have a question, like, I empathize with how important those answers were to me back then, and so now I do try and take the time to help people if they are looking genuinely for help with career, help with writing, just because I don't want to be the person who throws up a wall and just dismisses people looking to better their careers or better their writing. I don't think that's a good place to be in.
Yeah, and well, I don't know what to say. Thank you so much. Like, this episode, I've been waiting for this for so long, and yeah, it was a really good talk. And I also need to thank to anyone who's listening to this podcast. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Sorry if the episode didn't seem like a podcast, more like a bullet point interview. I know I'm a bit rusty. Trust me, I'll try to get better. But aside from that, at the time we're recording this episode, it's 24th of March 2026. And I hope by the time I upload this episode, things have gotten much better in Iran. And I have a lot of Iranian like audience because I'm also Iranian. So I don't want to go too much into it, but I hope, yeah, things have gotten better and the IRGC has been gone forever. And that's all I have to say for that in the short amount of time that we have. And with that being said, take care, everyone. Stay safe. And till the next episode, which hopefully won't be uploaded next year. Hopefully it'll be in a month or two. See you later. Bye.